Hello everyone, Trace Perot here. This is my channel, 20 at 70 plant-based. The date today is somewhere in the neighborhood of March 10th, I think. 10th or 11th. Lost track. This is video number 12, part 2, entitled How I Maintain an 80-10-10 low-fat, raw, vegan, plant-based lifestyle and diet, etc. So the first thing I always do is, well, everybody knows my experience by now. I'm about 30 years of raw vegan. First 15 was high-fat raw vegan. Last 15 years has been low-fat raw vegan. I had a couple years there in the very initial period, like 32 years ago. Around the 1990 mark, 1992, 1993, when I went vegetarian and then cooked vegan and then got into high-fat raw. Anyways, the first thing I do is our corrections from the last video. I know I had talked about omega-3s and omega-6s and that ratio. And I made the statement that omega-6s, facilitate or create inflation in the body. Well, I didn't mean that the price of your body went up, right? It was the wrong word. It should have been inflammation. So omega-6, omega-6, omega-3 imbalance toward the omega-6. The omega-6s is associated with increasing inflammation in your body, and that's a rather complex subject, but suffice it to say that you need a much higher ratio of omega-3s than is acquirable in the standard American diet, or especially in vegan diets or vegetarian diets. Anyway, so I wanted to make that correction. And also I wanted to just to add something on. I know I talked about athletics and how athletics really drives the 80-10-10 lifestyle, or as I prefer to call it, physical exercise or any kind of physical activity that's fairly intense. And just a side note on that, I just watched a video once again on UK Fruit Fest with Ronnie Smith, and he was interviewing this woman who lives with her partner in Australia, and her name is Jeanette Murray Wakelin, and she was a runner, or she is a runner. Both her and her partner are runners, and amazingly enough, and this is something that just blows open the whole idea of human endurance and human ability. On an 80-10-10 diet, her and her partner ran a marathon, whatever that is. It's like, 26.6 miles or something. They ran a marathon every single day for 366 days. Okay, that's 1 year plus 1 day, and they circumnavigated the continent of Australia. Okay, they did this every single day. They ran a marathon, and that was minimum. Some days they ran several miles over a marathon. Now, let's just sit with that for a minute. You know how spectacular it is just to complete one marathon and then have to take, whatever a cooked food eater has to take to recover. It could be up to 2 weeks they spend recovering from a marathon. This just proves out the point that 80-10-10 just totally maximizes your health, totally increases your capacity for physical exercise, among many other aspects of human existence. So I just wanted to make a point of that. Incredible, And the funny thing is that I think about that and I go, yeah, that's quite possible. I mean, They did have a crew that was feeding them along the way and setting up camp by the time they got there. They got picked up by several major news networks, and they wound up making a movie that took like 3 or 4 years to make, that was going to go be distributed, but it was curtailed by the COVID thing. And so this movie is due to come out probably within the next year. And so that's really probably one of the most spectacular feats ever accomplished by 2 human beings, to run a marathon plus every day for 365 days in a row, no days off, okay, completely on an 80-10-10 diet. They had tried to run a marathon. They had done a marathon. They ran a long range, multi-week running episode, if you want to call it that, when they ran the length of New Zealand. But apparently it was incredibly tough, and at that time they were on cooked vegan food. So the recoveries were really not very good, and nothing compared to how quickly you can recover on 80-10-10. So anyways, and they also, another side note, is that they ran in Vibrams, okay? Now I've done a lot of running in bare feet, and it's pretty amazing. It is true that running in running shoes is going to injure you eventually, but running bare feet, even on concrete, just did not faze me at all, and I still consider it the best way to do running if you're into running. So anyways, you can check that video out. I'll try to put a link in my description. It's Ronnie Smith at the UK Fruit Fest, and it was Jeanette Murray Wakeland. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what I learned about food this week. I had posted a video in which I had that rolinia disaster, so I thought I'd bone up on what rolinia was all about. So just a few quick facts about rolinia. Unfortunately, it is not really available in non-tropical environments, and the reason for that is that it only has a shelf life of about a week. So once it comes off the tree, you got about a week to eat it, and that's really not long enough to get it anywhere unless you're, rich and you want to have it, you want to pollute the jet stream and get it delivered to you on a jet. You could do that. So it has 1 week shelf life, and the flavor, if you've never had it, it tastes like lemon meringue in a pudding form. It's really incredible. It's native to the western Amazon, South America, and remarkably enough, rolinias will fruit in 3 years. In other words, you can plant a seedling tree, rolinia tree, and it will only take 3 years to start bearing fruit. Now, I went down to Costa Rica specifically actually to get some dental work done, and I also wanted to visit this raw food community down there, or community forming. I forget the name of it, but if you look up Costa Rica raw food community, you'll come up with it. So I went down there to visit. It was in the mountains of western Costa Rica, about 30-40 miles from the coast. And the proprietor there, the guy that put it all together, when he first moved there, and that was about 8 years prior to when I was there, he actually planted 100 rolinia trees, right? And those trees were going off when I was there, and it was just amazing, right? We could have fresh rolinia every day I was there. He was selling it right and left at the market, and so it just shows you what you can do, if you got a little piece of property in the tropics, and you have some foresight, unlike a durian tree, which I think takes 5 years, and a lot of other fruits like mame zapote take 5 years plus to get to a fruiting state. Rolinia takes 3 years, and that's not very long. Not only that, if you have enough of them, you can probably support yourself just by selling them wholesale to the farmers markets. So that's what I learned about rolinia this week. Now, the big event this last week actually it's been about a week and a half, was, hey, I got sick. Okay. Remember in the last video when I was saying why I was 80-10-10? Because I never get sick. Well, it's true. I never get sick. Okay. I think since 1990, I've probably been sick twice. I got sick after drinking a glass of wine on New Year's Eve. I got a cold about a week or two later. And right in the initial period when I was transitioning from cooked vegan to raw vegan, high-fat raw vegan, I did some yo-yoing, right? So I was going back and forth between cooked food and raw food. And during that period, it was a very educational period because I discovered what foods caused you to be sick, caused you to get a cold, right? So that's when I confirmed that the 3 grains, amaranth, millet, and quinoa would not make me sick if I ate them. I would not get any colds. If I was doing cooked food and I stuck to those 3 grains, I would never get sick, right? But if I suddenly went after something else, like I never steamed vegetables or anything like that, but I did eat potatoes, cooked potatoes. And sure enough, that made me sick. So I would venture to say that any kind of cooked food other than those 3 grains is going to continue to acidify your system and cause you illness, especially things like colds. Okay. So what happened? Why did I get sick? Okay. I haven't eaten any cooked food. I can't even remember the last time I ate cooked food. Okay. So, and I've been eating 100% organic, following the 80-10-10 diet, 10% fat, 10% protein, 8% calories from carbohydrates. So, I woke up, I think it was a Friday morning, I was just at work, and I woke up and I had a sore throat. I thought, oh, well, I must be allergic to something, or there's something in the air, or I got some kind of pollution got to me or something. But no, by the next morning, it was a full-blown cold, okay? But not, it was kind of marginal. It wasn't like the kind of cold you get if you're a SAD person, full on, can't get out of bed, full of phlegm, blah, blah, blah. I was coughing up stuff. I had a sore throat and all this. So, about 5 hours into this, I was going, what's happening? What is it that made me a cold? And I was running over in my mind, right? And then I realized that approximately 3 weeks to a month ago, I got an infection in my leg. At the shelter environment, it's kind of a dirty environment. There can be a lot of flies. There can be dog poop, there can be stuff like that. So I had a little nick on my knee, and sure enough, a fly must have gotten on it or something, and it got infected, and my entire leg from my knee to my ankle started to balloon out, and it went fast. And it really freaked me out. I thought, Jesus Christ, if I don't do something about this right away, I'm going to lose my leg. And so I went to the doctor, and I got a course of antibiotics. So here's the linchpin on this whole thing. I've always thought of medication as being toxic. Okay, ever since I started in on being a vegan or a vegetarian. And I proved that to myself a couple of times. The first time was when I had the parasite problem 5 or 6 years into being a high-fat raw vegan. And I was pretty freaked out about that. So before I tried the natural methods, I ran to the doctor and he prescribed some medication. And I took it. And I got really sick about 2-3 weeks after taking that stuff. I had like a combination cold flu, right? So that was something that just sort of sparked a thought in me that yes, medication, any kind of medication has a major toxic effect on your body, right? So as far as this recent episode of getting sick, I'm convinced there's no other reason why I could have gotten sick. It had to be the course of antibiotics that I was forced to take to keep from losing my leg, essentially. You know, and so that's the price I had to pay, you know, for that. I mean, there are ways to take care of infections externally. I have seen that done when I was at Kanakiki. I was actually witness to a guy that had been living in the jungle for like 20 years, and he got a seriously infected thumb. It was huge, swollen, you know, full of pus and whatnot, and he applied over a series of days a potion that he made out of herbs and things from the jungle and from the health food store. And he actually arrested that infection without taking any kind of internal medication or antibiotics. I know antibiotics are really terrible, but, you know, I had to make a decision. You know, am I going to let this get out of control while I'm finagling around with natural remedies, or I'm just going to try to nip it in the bud? So after that course, I took probiotics when I was taking the antibiotics. Okay, so every time I took a probiotic or an antibiotic, 12 hours later, I would take a probiotic, and then I continued the probiotics after the course of antibiotics had finished, and I did that for a week. So, you know, and yes, I did have some digestive distress, probably, you know, several days after finishing those antibiotics, and I may even still have a little hint of that going on, but I'm fully confident that eating the way I do, my flora will be restored completely within a very reasonable amount of time. Now, what is the narrative on colds? Okay, the established medical narrative is that colds are caused by a germ that's infectious, can be passed from one person to another. All right, if you go on the internet and you look up cold germ or what causes colds, how do you get infected with a cold, blah blah blah, you'll find all these scientists saying, well, you know, there's 200 what are called rhinoviruses out there, and any one of these can cause a cold, right? Well, first of all, I don't see how 200 different viruses can give you the same symptoms, because colds almost always have the same symptoms no matter who gets them. All right, so, and the other thing they do is they lump colds and flu together, okay? So if I was going to think that one or the other of those was a virus and one wasn't, I would definitely think that flu was a virus, right? So they're lumping the virus and the colds together, and they're saying, you know, that they're both, you know, they go hand in hand, and they're both infectious, and they're passed from one person to the other. And so anyways, a further exploration, I ran up on this website, Expose, and they have testimonials from all these doctors since the 1920s that are saying and questioning the whole germ theory thing. So they're questioning. The fact is what they're saying is that the germ theory, the idea that you can get infected by a germ, has never actually been proven. Okay, so I just wanted to make that note. Now, with regard to this thing about getting sick, okay, so you say, yeah, but people get colds and everybody gets them at one time, so they must be transferring them one from another. Well, no, that's not the way it happens, okay? Colds are actually a cleansing process, okay? Now, if you're loading yourself up with all this cooked food, you know, SAD stuff, fast food, blah, 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 you know, you're making your system very acidic, and your body has to have some way to handle that. And the way it handles that is it somehow stores whatever occurs because of that acidity, whether it's the acidity itself or some byproduct. Your body is storing that because it needs to get rid of it at some point. And the way that it gets rid of it is that, and this is why people get colds at the same time. If you're in a family, you know, one person gets a cold, pretty soon everybody gets a cold, right? Well, the reason is that, number one, you're eating a highly acidic diet, you know, your whole family. And number two, these things tend to occur when there's a temperature change, okay? So colds tend to appear at the changing of the seasons, okay, when there's a noticeable change in temperature. I don't know why this is. Maybe it's your body's instinct to prepare you for the season that's coming on, so it wants to get rid of the, all your acidic acquisitions that happened during the previous season. But that's the fact of the matter, all right? So a temperature change triggers your body to go into a cleansing cycle, and that's why you get a cold. What's called a cold has nothing to do with germs. You start coughing up all this phlegm, which is whatever that acidity or byproduct in your body that has been stored is being excreted, because you're coughing it up, you're sneezing it, you're blowing it out your nose, blah, 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 right? And very important, if you have a cold, you want to get rid of that, right? You don't want to swallow it and keep recycling. You want to get rid of that stuff because that's your body, that's what your body needs to do. So, that is what colds are all about in a nutshell. And what I wanted to say, in this case, it was picture perfect, right? Because when I travel from here on the east side of the big island of Hawaii and I go to the west side, there's usually a temperature differentiation of about 8 to 10 degrees. The west side of the island is the dry side. It tends to be a lot hotter over there, okay? I mean, last weekend, it was in the 80s every day, and it's like March, it's the first week in March, right? And it wouldn't cool off all day. So there's a big temperature variation between the east and the west side. So it's perfectly logical that going through that temperature change, 2 weeks after taking this course of antibiotics, triggered my body to go into a cleansing cycle. So, so I just wanted to illustrate that. And that's the reason I got sick. So now if that ever happens again, I know that I'm going to get sick afterwards. But other than that, I'll continue on, and I won't have to suffer those types of things anymore, unless I choose to take some kind of medication. And really the only kind of medication I can ever imagine taking is something that would be a life and death type of thing, or something in which you may lose a limb because you have a staph infection. And that's what it was. It was a staph infection. They travel very quickly, and you got to be very, very swift in your dealing with those. Otherwise they get out of hand. They can turn into sepsis. You can wind up, in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, that's that. So just to pick up on the last video, to number 12, part 1, I wanted to add some reasons that had to do with why I maintain the 80-10-10 diet. And there's a few of them that I didn't mention in that video, and then I'll go into how as best I can. So one why I left out was the fact that the 80-10-10 is environmentally supportive. So it's very minimal in terms of pollution. If you're like me, you can source most of your fruit locally, so you're cutting down on transportation that needs to be used, trucking. And the other thing is packaging. You don't really get much packaging. You can take your own bag to the farmer's market. You can take your own bag to the supermarket. Fruit does not come in a package, generally speaking. Dates might come in a little plastic thing, unfortunately, if they're not in a bin. Or apples might be served up, or kiwis in a plastic bag, but that's about it for packaging on 80-10-10 type regimes. And of course, it saves animal lives, which I mentioned before. I mean, there's some incredible number of animals that you will save every year if you are a vegan or an 80-10-10er, right? It's like astounding. I don't remember what it was, but it's something in the neighborhood of like, who knows, like 50 heads of cattle, right? You save, right? And each one of those heads of cattle takes like, thousands of gallons of water and grain and all this other stuff to raise them, right? So you're environmentally, you're right on the money. You're just not affecting the environment very much. Another thing I wanted to add was that as far as why I do 80-10-10, because I found that it's fast and it's easy. You can hear people talk about this. Oh, you're going to transition to an 80-10-10 diet. You got to do this, right? It sounds all complicated and uncomfortable. It's not. It's, when you get on the diet, it can be very fast and very easy to do. All right. It just depends on how complicated you want to make it. So in terms of complication, I basically eat the same thing with a variety of fruit, a variety of greens, but basically the same thing every 6 days a week. I try to once a week do something a little fancier. Okay, maybe I'll dehydrate some eggplant and make pizza out of it with, tomatoes. I'll make a tomato sauce, raw tomato sauce, and add, things on top of the eggplant or whatever. Or I'll make some hummus out of sprouted chickpeas, or I'll have and I'll make falafels, right, and rolled up collard greens, or I'll do a starchy vegetable meal like I had last night, where I put carrots in a food processor and I added shredded beets to them and onions and different kinds of peppers, and then I made a hot sauce. And then I had 2 bags of organic frozen corn that I had let thaw out. So I ate all those things together. Those are all starchy vegetables. Starchy vegetables do not combine well with fat, right? So it was a non-fat meal. And another thing about that is that if you're eating a little bit of fat every day, like I do, there is a slight tick in your energy. And if you go do a starchy meal or a non-fat meal, or if you eat nothing but fruit and greens all day, the next day you're going to have another level of energy. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing 80-10-10. Another reason why I do 80-10-10 is that it's clean. 80-10-10 is like for eating fruit, greens, this kind of stuff. It's very clean. Okay, there's no blood, there's no guts, there's no bones, there's no meat carcasses, right? There's none of that stuff. And quite frankly, I rarely ever use dishwashing liquid because my dishes don't get dirty, right? They just don't get dirty from this food. So I just wash them off with a sponge and some water, and to hell with the dishwashing soap. If I do use dishwashing soap, I will always use the biodegradable stuff, because regular dishwashing soap is one of the most caustic chemicals you can expose your skin and your breath to. Another reason why I do 80-10-10 is because it works. It gives me all the results that I want. It gives me high energy. It gives me retarded aging. I don't age, like SAD people. I actually improve with age. And that's one thing about the marathon runners. They were saying the more that they ran, on this marathon every day, the more that they ran, the better it got, the easier it got, okay? The better they felt, the better their health was, right? So that's the kind of state that you generate on 80-10-10. You get better with age. And I'm not talking about aging like wine. I'm just talking about, your health, your outlook, your ability to get things done, all improves. Another reason why I do it is the total lack of digestive issues. And if I do have a digestive issue, I almost always know exactly why. It was because I didn't combine something correctly. Okay, so if you know about food combining, you're doing 80-10-10, you're not going to have digestive issues, right? You're going to be as, regular as rain, right? So that was another reason. Another reason is the advantage in buoyancy, recovery, energy, and stamina, all which increase, exponentially on 80-10-10 as compared to other forms of raw diets or veganism or cooked veganism or cooked vegetarian, and certainly SAD, okay? So that just about covers it. The one last thing I wanted to get into, the big why, is, I guess, for lack of a better term, you would call it political. And this is the whole thing that I mentioned at the end of the previous video, which has to do with the herding culture. Now, I became familiar, was exposed to this idea through a book called The World Peace Diet, which was written by Will Tuttle. And he's written several books. He's actually a cooked vegan, which, I would venture to say is what the equivalent of an unenlightened vegan in terms of what he's actually eating. But he's a very dedicated, very ethically oriented person, and he's done a lot for veganism, and I respect him for that. And he wrote this book called The World Peace Diet, and in it he presents this concept, which is called the herding culture concept. And this is a very big reason why I do 80-10-10 and why I began in the beginning, why I got into it, was this idea of the herding culture. Now, the herding culture stems from basically the human corruption of hunting, okay? So the idea is that as human beings began to hunt for whatever reason, the more they were required to dominate large animals. And in doing this, the requirements of that sort of initiated all these characteristics of this thing called the herding culture, because they started herding it. Initially, I guess it was sheep and goats. And as they started to herding these things, then these other factors came into play. Like, for instance, the whole idea of capitalism. Okay, the word capital comes from cap, which is Latin, I believe, for head. Okay, so a head of cattle or a head of sheep or a head of goats meant wealth to people. So if you were able to control a number of these animals, and that was really the initial stages of having private wealth, was having and owning a herd. And along with that came power, okay, economic power, which eventually turned into the concept of capitalism. So along with that went a lot of other things, like, for instance, the fact that the males had to dominate the females. So in a herding situation, you want females, you want to dominate females so that they produce offspring and can increase your capital. Okay, so they do all kinds of things, like they're even doing now in slaughterhouses, where they're abusing female animals, making them produce offspring on a continuous basis until they are completely worn out, and then they're discarded or they're cut up and killed and made into food. Well, it's the same kind of principle. That stems from this whole idea of being in a herding culture, where you're dominating the female. So there's this whole thing of the male domination of the female that comes from the herding culture. So in that aspect, you can see that playing out in our own society. And the idea is that these things are still going on because we're still a herding culture. And one of the reasons why I maintain 80-10-10, right? Because it's a rebellion against that herding culture. I don't want to be any part of that, okay? I don't want to be part of this machine that establishes capital based on animal abuse, okay? So, what else goes along with that? It also that whole idea, if you're the most powerful and you've got the biggest herd, wealth is concentrated in a certain segment of society, and that's where the ruling elite comes into play. Okay, so the ruling elite that obviously runs our society, that is something, that's a phenomena of the herding culture. Okay. So anyways, if you want more on this, if you want really detailed information with scientific backup and research, by all means, take a look at that book, The World Peace Diet. It's very interesting because we had to learn how to control large animals that were very dangerous. We started acquiring an extreme hostility, the ability to be very hostile and that played out because, maybe our herd wasn't as big as the herd, 15 miles away in another village. So there arose conflicts between people, which resulted in feuding, and we had armed ourselves to eliminate, to kill animals. So now all of a sudden we were contemplating killing other human beings, right? Because now we had the hostile ability in our psyche, right? And we had the idea of capitalism, and more is better. Bigger herds were better and gave us power and got us what we want. So then we started looking at other people as potential threats. So that led to war and feuding and all this kind of stuff. So all this is still going on. I mean, the biggest example is right in our face right now, which is COVID-19. Okay, this is a phenomena of the herding culture. Okay, what can I say? They've actually succeeded in herding the entire human race, getting the entire human race to buckle under these ridiculous restrictions for something that is so overblown, out of proportion. It's absolutely amazing. And the reason why they can do that is because we are subject to this herding psychology. And every time we go to the supermarket and buy meat, okay, we are buying into the herding culture, and we are being herded. The herders are being herded. And so this is a big reason why I feel very confident, even being just a vegan, much less an 80-10-10 or low-fat raw vegan, is that I'm not subjecting myself to the largest degree that I can to this corruption of humanity in terms of being enslaved by the herding culture. And that's another thing that came from the herding culture, was enslavement. All right, we learned how to enslave people so they could increase our herds and increase our wealth. So racism is a phenomena of the herding culture. Sexism is a phenomena of the herding culture. And needless to say, the whole medical paradigm of treating symptoms instead of the cause of disease is a phenomena of the herding culture. Okay, this whole idea that pharmaceuticals, you're induced from the time you're a child to take vaccines and pharmaceuticals, because that is what our society has to offer you in terms of you being well enough to be productive, or well enough to be enslaved and be productive, I should say. So enough of that. So now I'm going to get into the main topic, the subject of this video, which is I covered why. Now I want to cover how I maintain the 80-10-10 diet as much as possible. Now I got a couple of comments on a video that said, well, why don't you just go ahead and show us how you do it? Okay, which I have a little bit along the way. If you've watched most of the videos, you've seen, examples of what I prepare and stuff like this. But I will say that I'm planning right now to do a whole video of just what I prepare in one day and how I do it on this particular regime. So I will go ahead and do that. I'm a little bit at sixes and sevens, so to speak, because I'm traveling a lot, between the different sides of the island. So I'm not able to get to the farmer's market all the time. So I'm not able to have my ideal shopping day where I plan the week and all that kind of stuff. But I'll see what I can do to alleviate that, and then make a video on the actual things that I prepare for the whole day, so you can see. Okay, reasons why I do this, or how I do it. Well, number one, I eat 100% organic. Okay, I do this, and this just reinforces the lifestyle. I do this because the flavor is better. Organic produce tastes infinitely better than non-organic produce. And also the confidence it gives you, because you're not getting all these pesticides. And believe me, those pesticides are real, and they are in your food. I don't care what the FDA says is safe. No pesticide, no soil amendment is safe. Okay. Early on, I was doing some research, and I ran across somebody, a scientist or a researcher or something, that had this very convincing argument about how the most minuscule portion of a substance can affect your body tremendously. And we're talking parts per billion. Okay? The most minuscule possible substance, like not even visible, can affect your body in a very negative way. So if you take that into consideration, there's stuff in conventional food that you don't want to be ingesting, okay? And once you start eating organic, if you make a mistake, like I do every now and then with nuts, and I get the massive, auras, pre-migraine auras, you will notice, okay, because you will be able to feel the effect. And that's the desired results. If you're eating SAD all day long and you're 20, 30 pounds overweight, you're not going to feel those results. So you're not going to know, you're not going to have firsthand experience of the effects of food additives and pesticides and soil additives, all right? So, but I'll tell you right now, any inorganic food that I eat, I feel the effects. If it's an avocado, I get a stomach ache. If it's an orange, I get a headache. And the list goes on. So that's very important in doing this diet, okay, is eating 100% organic. Also, another reason how I do this diet is I consider food to be primarily fuel, okay? Yes, it's very enjoyable to eat what I'm eating. But I still have in the forefront of my mind, when I go for those smoothies in the morning, that's what I need to get through the day. So I primarily think of food as fuel. I'm fueling my body. If it tastes fantastic, if it's sumptuous and delicious and satisfying, those are all side effects, okay? The primary thing is that it's fuel. The other thing, another reason how I do it is I try to bring in as much variety as possible. So I try to eat as many varieties of fruit and vegetables as I possibly can. I don't get bored with eating the same food all the time on this diet, but if you do get bored with that, variety is the answer. The other thing I do is if I have a craving, and I do have cravings every now and then. Like a couple days ago in the health food store, I was feeling a little run down because I was still coming off of this cold, and I don't know what was going on that day. Maybe something like was kind of bothering me or something. And I go into the health food store and I go, I'd really like to have some, corn tortillas, these baked organic corn tortillas or something. But I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. But I do have cravings. And so my first thought is to substitute. Okay, so instead of buying some cooked item, like one of these sprouted cooked corn tortilla things, I just immediately think of substitute. Well, what can I substitute to satisfy that craving? And of course, so I went down the road and got some organic corn in a bag, and I had corn, all right, organic raw corn, and it was just, if not more satisfying than any cooked kind of corn product. So I use substitution a lot, and I did that initially when I became a vegetarian and a vegan. I used substitution. So that's a good thing to have at the forefront. Another thing on how I maintain this is I try to go to farmers markets as much as possible, because you have a direct relationship with the food. You're eliminating shipping. You're eliminating a lot of third parties. The only person you have to deal with is the person that actually bought these items from a farmer, usually a local farmer. There's no packaging. It's laying out in front of you, and it just reeks of a healthy state of being. Right? You can see the colors, you can smell the fruit, and it always seems like a much happier environment. People seem a little bit more excited than when they're inside in a supermarket, and they're confronted with all this terrible food, right? So that's another thing that I do. I already mentioned that I do a fancy entree at least once a week. You may want to do that more, but I find that I don't really need to do that more than once a week, there's tons of great 80-10-10 raw, vegan, low-fat stuff that you can make. It all tastes fantastic. And I'll tell you right now, this kind of prepared 80-10-10 food, when it's done right, is far better tasting and satisfying than anything in the cooked food realm, just flat out. So another thing that I do, how I do this, how I maintain the lifestyle, is that I master the art of snacking. Okay, so this is something that you really want to do, because snacking tends to be more compulsive. You don't tend to think about it. You just want some way to, satisfy yourself. You want a snack, right? So the way that I do that, the things that are involved in that, number one, I love sun-dried tomatoes. I love to snack on them, but I soak them first, right? Because they kind of dehydrate you if you don't soak them, but they are delicious. They're like candy. So you take sun-dried tomatoes. They have a much intensified flavor, tomato flavor, to the point of they tasting like candy. And you just dump them in water for 4 or 5 hours, and then you can eat them, and they're totally delicious. You can have them on hand in your refrigerator all the time. And I'm talking not making dishes with them, just actually eating the sun-dried tomatoes themselves. Of course, they enhance any kind of tomato dish, sauce or hot sauce or whatever, tremendously. Also, dates and apples. This is one thing you have to get down. You have to try this. Different kinds of dates with apples. You can slice the apple, you can put the date on the apple and eat it like a little, treat. Or you can just munch on the apple and the dates in one hand and the apple in the other, right? If you're in California, I remember in Santa Barbara, there was a date dealer that was all organic. He must have had 15 varieties of dates. Now, dates can be very dry. So, you want to, that's mainly why you eat the apples with the dates, because the apples gives you the water, but the dates are very good. Around here, we can get blonde dates, which are just delicious, but they're dry. But I like them actually more than medjool dates or Deglet Nors. They just have a brighter flavor or something. They're not quite as sweet. They're not overly sweet. The other thing I use for snacks is asparagus, raw asparagus, which doesn't really need any accolades. It's very, very delicious. And spinach. Spinach is a wonderful way to snack. I get freshly grown spinach at the farmer's market. I just buy a huge bag of it and I munch on it all the time. Also, if you're going to supermarkets, those little plastic containers of what do you call it? Spring mix. Spring mix is great. I mean, if you've done your sweet fruit and you've cut it off at 2:00 and you're waiting for dinner at 6, spring mix is incredibly satisfying. Just buy one of those plastic containers. of spring mix and munch on it. It's really good. If you haven't done it before, you don't realize how good it can be. Also with the, got to get rid of the pen. Also with the power greens, which are really good. So all those different kinds of greens they throw in there are great for munching. And the last thing I would mention on munching is subacid fruit. So you can eat any kind of subacid fruit at any time in any combination with any food, right? So like if it's summer and you're on the East Coast, you got peaches, you got all kinds of cool stuff that you can eat, nectarines, all the stuff is subacid fruit, so you can eat it all day long, right? So, between everything I just mentioned, you have a heck of a lot of food that you can turn to for snacks that is just really delicious, okay? So I would encourage you to explore all these types of snacks that can hold you over, that can satisfy your cravings, that make you feel good, that give you energy, that sort of thing. The other thing is that you should master salad building, right? Try to make them visually appealing. You'll have a certain number of go-to fixings, like for me, that's yellow and red and orange peppers, lettuce, of course, but I always use shredded beets. Shredded beets sweet up a salad like nothing. Tomatoes, usually some kind of sprouts. Sunflower sprouts are the best, but I also use a lot of alfalfa sprouts and clover and, all that kind of stuff. And the greens of green onions. Okay, so those are my go-tos in terms of building a salad. My go-to dressing is tahini with lime juice. Okay, and I use that as I make a dip out of that. I dip cucumbers and white mushrooms or whatever mushroom is around, and I eat that as an entree before the salad. And then the remaining salad dressing I pour on the salad and mix in and eat the salad. So yeah, this is just amazingly satisfying, and I look forward to it almost every single night. The other thing you can do to help you maintain this diet is to disconnect your stove. Yeah, just get rid of it. Just pull the plug on that stove. I do like to have tea, and I don't consider tea to be some kind of cooked food. I think it's just, it's just hot water, So I do like to have tea, but I don't really have a stove that works. I don't have propane hooked up to my stove, so I haven't used it since I moved in here over a year and a half ago, and I don't really miss it. And the other thing that I do to maintain the 80-10-10 diet is I eat a lot, okay? You gotta eat a lot. When you sit down to eat, when you snack, just think big, Eat as much as you can and make sure that they're large quantities, okay? I just don't buy the fact, yes, if you're on an SAD diet, the less food you eat is better. No question about it. But if you're on 80-10-10, the more food you eat is better. And the other thing is kind of another way that I maintain the diet is more of a philosophical reason. And that is, and that involves adjusting your values. So if you're just starting out on this diet, or if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you're thinking about going on this diet, or you're an SAD person and you're not getting results, right, and you want something better and you're considering this diet, or transitioning to this diet, you want to adjust your values. And what I mean by that is this is something that comes from Tony Robbins. It means that, if you have a certain value that is important to you, like family, beauty, health, wealth, success, if you have one of these prominent values or more than one of these prominent values, and you don't feel like you're being fulfilled in that area, okay? Well, the simple solution is to adjust your value, right? Not your value, but the degree to which you experience your value. So if you're an SAD person and you go to a health bar and you have a green drink or a smoothie, right? Then you need to congratulate yourself. You're on the road to a healthy diet. And you need to appreciate that as fulfilling your values. Yes, I fulfilled my value today of having a healthier diet because I went to a juice bar and had a smoothie, right? So it's important that you're satisfied in doing that. Not that you're telling yourself, oh my God, I'd never be able to survive on eating all fruit, all day long and just a salad at dinner, Even though I can testify that this is tremendously satisfying and the results you get are fantastic, if you're not doing that, you don't want to be disappointed. You want to orient your value towards what you actually did accomplish. Okay, so if all you did for a whole day and you're on SAD is go to a health bar and have a smoothie, congratulate yourself, appreciate that, and then carry on. Because if you appreciate it, it's going to happen more. And that's the key. If you have a vision for the way that you want to eat or live, if you appreciate what you can do right now, what you have right now, that's the first step. Because based on your ability to appreciate what is in your life right now that's positive, that is going to propel you to whatever vision that you have. Okay, so I really believe this. You have to appreciate what you have in order to progress to what you really want or what your vision for your life is. So, I could say in my case, yeah, I'd like to be eating some really gourmet, well, not high-fat gourmet, but gourmet 80-10-10 meal, every other night. But I appreciate my salad, so it's not that big of a deal. And then once a week, I'll hit the really good, prepared 80-10-10 dinner, and I'll appreciate it, So I guess that's the way that plays out. But it plays out in other things, like in a lot of other activities I do. So what else is there? I'm looking at my cheat sheet. That looks like all I have to offer on that subject. Hopefully that will help you out. Like I said, I'm going to try to put together a video that actually shows on a timeline sequence what I eat in a day and how I prepare it. That may be a couple of weeks out, but it should be kind of fun. So I'm going to start planning on doing that. I don't have a real fancy kitchen at this point, but what I have is more than adequate. And so if you like the video, like or subscribe or comment. I love the comments, and share with anybody you want to share on Facebook or whatever. Just do all that good stuff, and I will check in with you on the next video, which should hopefully be coming up in about a week. So have a great rest of your day, evening, night, morning, whatever it is, and wherever you are.